Council, and Lisa from Larimer. And we didn't plan a lot formally for this session because we wanted to be really open and interactive with you and what your specific questions are. We have covered the funding stream a little bit, on support calls and through articles over time, but we've also heard a lot of feedback. And so one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got about funding streams is that the budget summary was too complicated. And so we took a lot of effort in streamlining the budget figures so that it is going to be a lot simpler and really only focus on what is tracked in sugar as opposed to everything in your budget. So we're hoping that that will clarify things. We will be doing a training, a formal webinar call on the new GAE, General Accounting Encumbrance for Race to the Top, and what that process is going to look like. We will be doing that in the next couple of weeks after the QRIS coordinators finalize all the budgets. We have a meeting with them next week on Tuesday to finalize that process, and then we will be sharing that information. So this session is not specific to the GAE. I just wanted to make that clear, because we've got a lot of people here. I was kind of surprised. So this is really just, in general, what you can use funding stream records for. We have not released kind of official guidance on how to create your own funding stream records. If you have a foundation or another governmental entity and you want to track other types of funding in sugar, you can. You are welcome to. Just submit a support ticket and we'll walk you through the first one, and we can go through that a little bit today. We haven't emphasized that a lot because we have a lot going on with the OEC grants, and so we don't have a lot of support staff time to go through that process yet this year. But that is absolutely a priority of ECLA, is that you're tracking all of your different funding streams in sugar, and if there are things that you need to track for a particular funding stream that is not already in sugar, then we'd love to hear from you and figure out if we can easily track that, or if that needs to be kind of a bigger enhancement that would benefit more than one council. So again, the purpose of today's session is really just to go through the basics of the funding stream records and answer any questions that there may be. We can certainly talk about the GAE a little bit towards the end if we have time, but again, that information is somewhat limited at this point, and there will be a formal training on that later. Anything on that?
I have created my own funding streams in sugar. One of them was the first year when we had programs who had partial ratings because of ITQA, and then we got that extra little bit of money, and that was a separate line. So we created our own funding stream to track that.
Great.
And some other things that we've done. So I've used it, and then I do it.
So we might have you pull up some of those examples a little later. Okay, so we are in sugar right now. And I just pulled up a school readiness funding stream record for the Denver Council just to walk through a few things. This will look really similar to your school readiness funding stream records because ECLA was kind enough to generate all of those for us. In future years, we may not need to do that, where you can kind of generate your own going forward, but for the at least for the next fiscal year, we'll probably do that again, just to keep it consistent, make it easy for everyone. So on this first tab, this is called the program summary, and not a lot has changed on this over the years. So if you were in the CCAP pilot, this is basically the same as it was back then. If you just implemented last year, this is the same as it's been. So not a lot new here. It's really just containing the basic information about your particular funding stream. What's really important here is the program abbreviation. Do not change that once you set it. The reason why is it informs all of these great naming conventions for requisitions and transfers and spending records. And so if you go change this, I think it will change them, but it will completely slow down everything for a little bit, right?
It messes up your application.
And it will mess up your application. Do you have experience with that?
I do.
Yeah, because actually the applications are all coded behind the scenes to go to Colorado Shines, and they use that program abbreviation to streamline things. And so if you change that, then it will not show on Colorado Shines anymore. So don't change that. If it's a custom funding stream and it's a new abbreviation, you can pick whatever makes sense to you, and that's totally fine. And you will get to the point where you can actually say you want an application posted on Colorado Shines. Now all the settings are here, but you still need to contact ECLA before you do that so that we can customize those questions for that particular funding stream. Otherwise, it's just going to show, actually it probably wouldn't show anything, it's not hard coded. But it's kind of the setup that allows that to be possible. So, all right, so we're going to move down a little bit. These functional areas, this is just something that can help kind of define what are we working on. It's tied to the Colorado Early Childhood Framework, the older one. The domains are the same. Start date and end date are also important because this makes up the naming convention here for the funding stream record, which makes it easier to understand which funding stream you're looking at. Throughout Sugar, we try to use naming conventions to calculate the names of things as much as possible so that it's really easy to find what you're looking for and you get used to looking at it a certain way. What this also does is you'll probably notice on your requisitions, the requisition equals the program abbreviation SR and the last two digits of the end date, which is 17. So for this year, it's SR 17. A lot of you might have noticed that Race to the Top went from Race to the Top RTT 16 to RTT 17 in around April of last year. And that's because we updated the end date because we thought at the time, we received guidance at the time that that should be one funding stream because it was all Race to the Top. And it was just continuing over the end of the year. And then we find out later that actually it is a separate contract year, and so the RTT 16 was restored, and now we have an RTT 17 that is separate. So that's what happened over the weekend. So if you're reviewing things and things look a little off, then please let us know because that was a really big undertaking, and we did the best we could using those rules. But if you're feeling like a spending record should have been in 15-16 as opposed to 16-17, just let us know and we'll get that corrected. Okay, so end date is really important, obviously. You can also actually relate the funding stream to the funder and include the funder logo. So the funder logo is only really relevant if you do post an application on Colorado Shines. It will show the little funder logo, which will be really nice recognition of your funders in funding that program. So that's what that is. You have a place to put in your ECC grant contract number and CDHS status if it were a CDHS grant. At one point we did want to have that information synced down from Salesforce. That has not occurred to date, and there may be different priorities for the enhancements related to that integration. So we will keep you all in the loop on whether or not we're going to actually sync the funding stream records or not. And of course, we would work with the Sugar Advisory Group to make sure that that is in alignment with their priorities as well. Okay. For key contacts, so this is actually where the program officer, in our case, as the Denver Council, we would have Emily Grovius as our program officer. And by setting it up this way, we can actually set up workflows that go directly to Emily. And we have a program actually in Denver, the Denver Preschool Program, where we have to have all of our MOUs signed by our program officer of Denver Preschool Program. And so in order to do that, we needed a relationship on the funding stream record so that he would get all the MOUs routed to him. In our case, we haven't really leveraged this very much in the past, but we could use it for things like, spending records that need prior approval, such as capital improvements. Maybe we want to automate that, so if a capital improvement is over a certain threshold, it automatically sends a notification up to the coordinator before it is reimbursed or before it's processed. So that's something we could use that for, but it's not currently in place. The grant lead. Can anyone tell me what the grant lead is? It used to be called program manager. Oh, come on. We've got some grant leads in here.
Whoever's responsible for the grant.
That's exactly right. So whoever is responsible for the grant. So this is going to be your primary program staff person. This is usually not the financial person who's separate. This should be the program person who is, the lead on the grant. In most grants, you have to define who that is on the application or in your budget documents or scope of work. That's who you put here. This person, what does this give the person? You get a lot of privileges as the grant lead. What do you get? Access to all the records. What do you mean?
All the money. Signing MOUs, doing budget.
Do you want to talk more about it?
I'm trying to think, well, where would it have issues? Like obviously in Easy Connect, I have access to see everything if I'm in Easy Connect then, because all of the programs are associated with my name. Whereas my coaches are only going to see the programs that they are associated with. So.
That's a good example. So did everyone know that? How many grant leads do we have in the room? Lots. Great. Did you all know that when you log into Easy Connect, you have access to all programs participating in any of your grants? Okay. Okay, great. So if you're a coach, you are only going to see those providers who you are actually a lead coach for. So even if you have a requisition for a particular site, if you are not their lead coach, you don't see them in Easy Connect. Any navigator is going to be able to see anyone who they're assigned to. So that's how those privileges work. Additionally, the grant lead has all of the pre-approval notifications for spending records all go through the grant lead. So that is a benefit. You can actively monitor your grant. That's everybody's dream, right? It really does, because as the grant lead, you are responsible for all of the expenses that are being charged to your grant. So quality improvement is only one part of that budget, but all the quality improvement expenses route through you because you are responsible for those expenses. So that's really important.
It is.
You can also define a special approver. So we originally had this set up as the primary contact on the council record, which is usually the council coordinator. But we discovered that people wanted to be able to have a separate special approver from your council coordinator. The special approver approves any transaction over $2,500 or any capital improvement. So that's kind of their role. The primary contact on the council record is who signs the MOU. So all of this, we're talking a lot about the details, but the whole point of this is that all of these settings are on your funding stream record. So you can customize this for every funding stream record you have. So if you create new funding stream records for a foundation, for example, you can customize all of this to be specific to that grant, as opposed to just having default settings related to the Office of Early Childhood. Okay. I don't know why this is assigned to Bill, but usually it's assigned to the grant lead. I think it's because Bill created all of our funding streams.
Well, Sharon, you just made my dream come true of being in sugar.
Wonderful.
I just wanted you to know that.
Good.
Emily, I can help you with that. Cool. If you don't stay there, in one place.
We can share her.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving on to the next
Yeah,
tab.
we can make you the lead on all of it.
Yes.
How fast?
Careful what you wish you were. Okay, so application setup. So there's some really important things in here, one of which application. So if you decide you're doing a funding stream and it does not have an application for participants, you can say no. So this is really helpful if you've got, for example, a general operating funding stream that you want to use to supplement coaching services. Then you don't have to have an application for that. If that's allowable under your general operating grant, which you would argue it would be, you would say no, and then you would use your discretion to use those funds to supplement coaching services, as an example. But this is really focused on quality improvement grants and coaching and those kinds of things. There is a huge need to expand the funding stream to be useful for programs that are catering more to individuals, scholarships, things like that, which would be a very easy tweak. It could also be used for things like mental health consultation or social emotional programs and lots of child health, lots of different things. But we haven't developed all of that because we have been working on the OEC grants and the Race to the Top in particular. But the next phase of ECLA is really taking the sugar advisory group, getting everybody's input on what else needs to be in sugar so that we can see the full impact of councils on early childhood. So it is not the end when Race to the Top goes away. You know, there's still fundraising efforts to make sure that ECLA has funding to be able to do more in sugar. All right. So if I say no, then all of these other fields go away because it's not relevant. But we're going to say yes. And so you can see some really important things that you have control over as the grant lead or as someone on the funding stream record, one of which is the application release date. So let's say that everybody's defaulting to May 2nd, but you want to do it May 15th. That is your prerogative, and you can update this date. You can also update the QI application deadline. Now sometimes your funder is going to dictate when that must be. And so you have to do it on that date or before that date. So you just want to be aware of your funder requirements, but this is customizable by you. So we don't have to do that for you. Where to post the application gives you a couple of different options. So you could actually only post an application in EC Connect. Let's say you're trying to do an application for informal care providers who are not licensed. Is it helpful to have that in Colorado Shines? Maybe not. These are not licensed providers. So you might want to just post that in EC Connect. If you don't want to have an application posted online at all, you can actually select manual. We had an example, one of our program staff did a program under the Gary Community Investment grant for family, friend, and neighbor care and did manual applications and was able to use requisitions and all of those things. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so the description and the requirements, these actually show on the portal. So it's really important that you use language that is relevant to the people who would be viewing this online, and that is in alignment with your grant, obviously. So just know that this shows on EC Connect. And we try to be very clear, anywhere where there's a field that populates EC Connect, we try to make that little note so that you are aware of that. Okay. Any questions so far? I guess I skipped over QI application type. These are going to be really important for after the request for applications that's happening in February. Because as you know, a lot of our initial grants were set up on a 3-year grant cycle. So for school readiness, for example, you had an initial application year, and then you had annual renewals of that 3-year cycle, and there were different rules for those, as opposed to kind of a typical annual renewal. Because we're under extensions of everything, then we're under the annual renewal. So we do have guidance on this on the support site, and I'm sure we'll have to customize this a little bit based on the RFA, whatever that entails, especially if it's a 5-year period. It would, we would need to adjust this a little bit. But it just allows you as a regular user to be able to select that without having to work with the developers on what that really means. All right. underneath that is the MOU signer setup. And this is just what it sounds like. So it lets you figure out when the participant signs the MOU, when the council signs the MOU, and if the funder program officer needs to sign the MOU. And sometimes you want an additional contact on an MOU, so you can put that in. Sometimes grant leads like to be in there, for example. And so what we always do is we always have the program signed first, and then it comes to your primary contact at your council who's authorized to sign on behalf of your council. And so they can actually review it with the participant's signature and then sign. And this all goes through electronically. The other thing that we've streamlined is that now this EchoSign template name and subject, this is another thing that you cannot change once you set it. Because there's hard coding that goes into our EchoSign integration that actually specifically looks to this field and sends the correct document. Yeah?
How's this gonna look going into the new funding when they are sending out the MOU and we're not?
For the GAE.
Oh, so, yeah, so basically, again, this is kind of, hasn't been 100% finalized, so just want to say that. But basically what will happen is you are going to show your intent to fund that program, and then the QRIS coordinator is going to go into the application record and say, okay, I agree with this, approve and send MOU. So they are not, the MOU is not coming from them, it's still coming from you guys. It's still using your documents.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything about Emily, for example, So I know, I'm sorry. Sugar will say that you did it, but the provider will never know. Yeah.
So they are still sending it though. I won't hit send. I'm just,
Yeah,
I tell
you can-
them, I wait list,
Yeah.
tell them, and then they'll send it.
Yeah, and if you try to send it and you don't have enough money, then it will shoot to wait list. And so, you won't have to worry about, accidentally sending
So
one.
then when the providers, because right now it's they sign and it comes to me.
Yes, and that will be the same process.
All right, so after they sign, then it'll come to me
Yeah.
even though the state was
And in
with it.
fact, even when the initial email goes out, you will be copied on it.
Okay.
So you will know when that happens. And we're also going to create workflows that tell you that is happening. So we're going to create a workflow to the QRS coordinators that says, hey, this site has been waitlisted. Click here to review and approve. And then you will be on that email, and then you'll be on the email that says that it was approved or maybe it was rejected for some reason. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So again, the funding stream is kind of winning that. It's set this way, and it's going to continue to be that way.
Yeah, we are waitlisting them. I thought I heard in the first session this morning that we are not gonna waitlist.
There was some conversation today about where we are in the process, so.
Sorry, there's some confusion there. So what I was saying earlier wasn't that you shouldn't waitlist. It's that even if you attempt to send the MOU, if you don't have sufficient funds to approve it, it will automatically go to waitlisted. So whether you choose to actively waitlist or to attempt to send the MOU, at which point it will be waitlisted, the end result will be the same. It'll be waitlisted and OEC will be notified and they will come in and approve it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so Sandy actually had a really good example, maybe, of this, maybe not. So here, maybe I could pull up the application.
So,
Yeah,
I heard the same thing she did. We both heard that if we do have sufficient funding, that the MOU would go through and would not be waitlisted.
That's correct.
And so I actually did send an MOU today. And
That is correct.
And it did go through, which I thought it was not supposed to.
So, okay, so let's look at your funding stream. It's DCECC, right?
DCCC.
Oh, you know what? I think I'm logged in as Melania somehow. So I'm gonna
testing the system.
I'm always testing the system.
Here, I'll take that one. So let me just pull up, I was logged in as Lelania, so I didn't have access to your.
And it was RTT.
Yep, okay, so. All right, so we're gonna go look at your funding stream, and you said you did this today.
Today.
So maybe something related to what we're doing.
So go to the applications.
Well, I'm gonna go to the funding stream
Oh, okay,
first.
so go to funding.
Yep. Okay, so RTTQI,
Yep.
16, 17. All right, so I'm just gonna go look at the QI dollars. So you have, okay, so this is not bad, and let me tell you why. Okay, so this just happened over the weekend. We just split 15-16 from 16-17, and because we did not want to put in incorrect budget information, we populated everything with $1, okay? Because it's very clear this is not right? So even though this says negative $36,000, we know that that's not right. Because you had at least $34,000 last time we talked, I think, right? So what we can see here, though, is really important from a dashboard standpoint. You can see that you have preliminary dollars of $16,000. That means you have that many people waiting in wait list as preliminary. So these have not been assigned, but they are waiting there for you as soon as you're ready to approve them. And by you, I actually mean the GAE, so not right now. So then we can see down here, so these are the dollars to be assigned. And if I had a budget in here, then normally this would say like, oh, I've got $1,200 remaining or something like that. Now down here in participant QI requisitions, I can see that my approved requisitions is $36,600. This is where this negative is coming from. Because it's just taking approved participant, really budget minus approved participant is this. And it's doing some kind of rounding, I guess. And so that's what that means. And if we scroll down, we can also see from a dashboarding standpoint how much money has been used and how much is remaining. And so I can see that there might be a little bit of a mismatch. Because funds remaining plus funds utilized should be, but there are transfers that are showing? Or does it just need to recalculate?
It just needs to be recalculated in that forever, so I can do that in SQL.
Oh, for each one? Oh, you gotta recalculate all of them.
Yeah, which would take forever, so we can do it.
Okay. Okay, so what he's saying, this is okay. So what he's saying is basically the way sugar works is that in a lot of cases, sugar knows to go update a related record when you do something on a particular record. Sometimes when you've got a lot of calculated fields layered on top of each other, you actually have to make it recalculate so that it's really thinking about, oh, I need to update this formula, which updates this record, which updates this one, which updates this one. And the funding stream is way up at the top. So what Bill just said is he's going to, on the back end, manually, through a SQL query, actually make it just recalculate everything. That will update all of these formulas so that all these will be correct. What it looks like it's doing is it's pulling in information on one or both of the funding streams that were related to race to the top because the requisitions and the spending have not been recalculated. So this is really good. Thank you, Sandy. So the bigger question, I think, is how did you send an MOU?
I just looked, and I didn't see one.
Okay, let's see. So So which application did you think you sent? This is so one quick tip on funding streams. Underneath the funding stream is your sub-panel. That's going to have all your applications, all your participants, everything that's related to that funding stream. Is it anywhere on this
I
screen?
thought it was the second one.
FCP3?
It says it's out for signing.
Sure does. You tricked even Bill. That's hard to do. Okay, so it looks like it's waiting for you to sign.
They've already sent it.
Yeah, they've already sent it back to me, I need to sign it.
Okay. That was fast.
It wasn't one of those that was gonna go on for months, like summer months. Right away waiting for that. They said, did you call her?
That's awesome. Okay, so there were, did you find it?
So this one's a confusing one. It looks like you sent the MOU on the 11th, and then some wacky stuff happened, and it seems like it was actually created. So I'm going to check in EchoSign, but I think this is fine.
So wait, you sent it on the 11th or on
So if you
today?
look in the change log, you can see that it, like the first time you attempted to send it was on, yeah.
Oh, because you did check MOU this morning. That is different than MOU sent.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
But look, it says, hooray, Sandra, you just sent it today at 10:30 a.m.
Yeah, that's when I did it.
So that's all today.
Right.
You were doing a lot this morning.
What section were you in?
That's why I put my computer was dangerous.
Okay, I'm just trying
No
to
wonder we
see.
didn't have
So
any
see how-
bandwidth, Bill.
So it looks like down on November 11th, you had selected send MOU, and there it said not sent because there was an MOU error.
Yeah, I think it was that
So did
unique
it
primary
take a check
contact,
before?
yeah, the unique primary contact, so I got that fixed.
So it's looking like Bill's investigating, but it's looking like probably what happened is when you initially hit send MOU, you had available budget, and by the time it actually went through,
I didn't.
then you didn't anymore because we did the update over the weekend.
Okay.
So that's how it did it, but we're going to review that because that's kind of what we call, it's sort of like a little bit of a loophole. And so we want to make sure that it's going to check that budget each time it tries to resend. So, right. Okay, cool. And this is really complicated stuff, so really big bravo, hand of applause for Bill. Okay, so that's what it looks like happened. If we go back to the funding stream record. Now, would the funding stream, would the applications be tied to the whole funding stream, 15, 16?
No,
Yeah, they should be on 16. Okay, cool. So at this point, because we updated all of the budgets to $1 and 1 hour, nobody should be able to send a new MOU, and that is intentional. So please do not try to send an MOU, or if you tried to send an MOU, it should fail and waitlist them. That's because we're going to be working with the OEC team to get those approved budgets in. It has been incredibly confusing on what the budget numbers really were. And so now we're going to be using Sugar to define exactly how much was obligated, reconcile that with the GAE, and then give the appropriate budget figure. And then as you're approving new applications, then it will just draw new funds down from the GAE. So there's a bit of work to be done before that's possible, but we're hoping to work on that next week. Yes?
So what do you recommend if you have a bunch of MOUs out that have been signed?
Leave them, that's fine.
And they're going to spend money and it's all
Just leave
good?
it, it's
Okay,
fine.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop. Yeah, just don't send any new ones. If you feel comfortable spending without having the money, then it's okay, and we will reconcile that. Just make sure that, allowable, like, you don't want to be giving it to sites who are level 2s, like those kinds of things. Just make sure of that, because that could be an issue later. Yes.
But the gal that did, when I did send that out,
Uh-huh.
she has sent it back to me. Can I sign it?
Yes,
Okay.
because the money's already out.
All right.
Yes.
Question, so I have one site that was a level 2 back in May, June. But they're not able, they never have had the availability to apply for RTT or any other type of funding. And I have another site that just got awarded level 2, and there's, doesn't even link to their council or any opportunities to apply for any funding.
So what I'm guessing is maybe they don't have a county in Salesforce. So I might check that. And then the other one, you're saying they never got the prompt. So sometimes there's a holdup in licensing where they're not really officially a level 2, so that can be an issue. So I would check the Salesforce record and make sure it's showing up officially as a level 2, and it is. So then I would submit a support ticket because it's probably a case-by-case thing. You know, that kind of thing happens every now and then where there's something on the record that we can identify usually really quickly. Just send us a link to the record and then we can get it fixed. Anything you want to add to that as the support person?
Jose looks at it first.
So while we're on that a little bit, I've noticed that every time we get a level 2, their applications are complete, everything is done, otherwise they wouldn't have had a level 2. But before we can go in and do the application, it is saying their application is incomplete and they have to go back in and recheck. Right? Okay, so it's not just me. So you have
Is
to
that a
go.
thing
I
that
can
you guys?
slightly answer to this. So my understanding is once a program is awarded a level 2, Salesforce automatically archives that application where they reach their level 2 and then resets their application. So their application will show all the same information. They just want them to go in and re-verify that all the information is still correct before they do the race to the top application. That's all that is.
All right. So it's not a glitch. So it's just, we just need to tell them just to go in and
Right,
re-verify
it's just
and
a
then check the
guarantee that
box.
we know that they're re-verifying all their information is still correct.
Yeah, and at one point we had some code that checked to see if those checkboxes had been checked within the last 30 days. But because of the new archival process that was implemented, that code doesn't really work like that because it's a separate record. So we might be able to look and see if we can actually look if there are any applications that have been verified in the last 30 days and then not require them to check those. Because that's actually Easy Connect doing that, it's not Salesforce. Salesforce just sort of changed how they were archiving records, and so it sort of tripped us up a little bit. So that's kind of how that works. Thanks for the explanation, Michelle. Okay, great. Anything else? All right, so let's go back to that funding. Okay, so we were in application setup. I think we covered the MOU stuff. I was showing you that, as you can see in the list view, underneath the funding stream record, just like everywhere in Sugar, you can see all the related applications. So sometimes it's actually faster, like you were saying, oh, here's the application. Sometimes it's faster to go to the funding stream record and look it up from there, because then you can see, like if you have an MOU error, for example, go to the funding stream first, see if things look right, and then go to the application, go to the account records, make sure that the primary contact information is there, that kind of thing. It's just a little shortcut. And it has some other stuff. It has all the participant relationships. That participant relationship is formed when the MOU comes back fully executed, which means both parties have signed. So you're not going to see them as participants until the MOU is signed. So if we go back up to the next tab, we can see, actually I'm going to skip rubric for a second. The participation counts. So this is really cool. This is new this year, where Sugar is actually summarizing your total count of participants for you. This is really handy too when we want to report on all councils very quickly, like, hey, we've got, 600 providers in school readiness, or whatever number it is. So you can see here the total count of participants. Now in Denver, we had a goal of 40 participants originally. That was in our scope of work. So in a lot of these sessions, we've talked about SMART goals, performance measurement, performance goals. This was an identified goal in our scope of work. Now, we did not achieve that goal. You can see we're only at 90% of total participants. But we have a reason for that. So data is only as powerful as the full context of the data. So when we're reporting, we're going to say, hey, we have 36 participants. We originally thought we would have 40, but it turns out that several of our providers have more classrooms than we thought they were going to have. And so it costs us a little more to support larger centers than it does to support small home providers or something like that. So as long as you have a reasonable justification for a variance, usually that's going to be okay. So you can see here, for example, we exceeded our goal for homes. We were low on centers, and that's because we had several large centers who kind of ate up that part of the pie. Any questions on this?
When did you do that?
It was around July, I think. And we covered it on the support calls, and it's there's some articles on the support site. We were trying to do lots of iterations of little enhancements. This cost us like nothing to do. It's very simple to do, it's just useful. So we're trying to do more things like that where it's not expensive to do the enhancement, but it's useful to you. And we're also going to go through a process of reviewing kind of what our plans are for the next 12 months with OEC to figure out what our enhancement priorities are. And we're hoping to involve the Sugar Advisory
So
Group.
does that column over there, does that pre-generate based on how many people you've pulled over?
It sure
Or do
does.
you have to, well, then I look amazing over there. Because I don't have any goals over here. I said none. So I'm looking really good over here. 100%.
You have exceeded all of your goals.
I've exceeded them.
Awesome. Yeah, so you have to put in your targets. It will calculate your participants. And right now, so it is able to, yeah, it does have to match your scope of work though. So, you know. So if it also can track informal care providers. So, you know, ECHLA was administering the FFN grant, mini grant. There are a couple of councils who have those kinds of grants. So you can use this for that. You just need to categorize those account records as informal care providers, and then it will roll up this way. What we don't have on here is individuals participating. This is something that we would love to explore more around for different grants that are really supporting individuals as opposed to organizations. But at this point, it's not really part of the OAC scope of work, so we're not focused on that. Any questions? Other questions? All right, so budget summary, I'm going to skip for a minute. And we're going to go straight to the things that make up the budget summary. So, you know, when you think about an Excel workbook, for example, you've got different tabs on the bottom of Excel, and usually you kind of have a summary sheet at the very front, and you've got all these little tabs with worksheets that kind of feed into your summary. So this is kind of how we're thinking about the funding stream. The QI dollars detail is basically a worksheet for you to help you tell Sugar how much money you have available for QI dollars. And those are directly assigned to providers. You also have an internal coaching detail, an external coaching detail. We would love to build out training detail that is contingent on what we do with PDIS. So we are still trying to determine what next steps are with the integration with PDIS, and is training going to be recorded in Sugar, or is training going to be recorded in PDIS, and what that really looks like. So that's still in the works. And we also have admin, which you can primarily ignore. So we don't need to worry about that. So if you look at QI dollar detail, you can see here that you can edit the direct QI budget for participants. And this is going to exactly match your budget. So in every budget for OEC, there should be a line item that says total quality improvement or something like that, that is just the QI dollars. Is that about right? Yeah. And in some cases, you might have broken out kind of this discretionary amount versus money that's specific to the provider allocation process, but I think in most cases people have kind of combined those two numbers. Is that the case? Well, yeah. No, I'm not sure. No? Okay. Well, it should be on your budget exactly how much money you are expecting to spend directly with providers. This means the money you're giving to providers to spend on quality improvement activities. This is not saying I've got a different part of my budget and I'm spending it on health and safety kits for something related to the grant. This is very specifically what you are giving to providers and what they are using on quality improvement. So in this case, we didn't go all the way up to 20% for discretionary. 20% is the max you can use as discretionary in the grant, in any of the grants, and race to the top, it is now 0% discretionary. We're going to get into what that really means. So in this case, we're saying there's $7,160 that's reserved for the council's discretion. That doesn't mean the council is spending it. That means the council is going to give it to providers, but they are deciding. So it's not, this is the formula, this is how much you get, provider. It's you've got that, and now as the council, I know that you want to purchase, what's an expensive school readiness thing? A whole TSG curriculum. And so I need to give you an extra $300, so I'm going to give that to you from my discretion. I'm not spending it, I'm giving it to the provider, but it is my discretion. Yes?
20% of the QI total.
Yes. And so when you put in the numbers, it's going to calculate the percentages for you just as a quick check. So you want to make sure this number is not more than 20% for OEC grants. Now, we have one grant that's a smaller foundation grant where all of it is discretionary to the council because she really wanted to very closely control what provider is getting what amount of money. And that's okay if your funder says it's okay. But in our case, we have an allocation formula so that we can be fair and representative of all participants in the particular programs. And so to continue that theme of fairness, they get a minimum amount, and if you remove some of that funding from them, you need a reason. And if you give them more money, you need a reason. And you can only do that up to this 20% council discretionary. Does that make sense? There's been a lot of confusion on that.
So does that discretionary then populate?
It sure does, yep. So as soon as you populate this field, then you are going to create a pooled requisition, which is linked to right here. So if you're trying to get to it really quickly, you can click on this. Now you can see my pooled dollars remaining is only $5,600. So I've already spent some of my discretionary by giving it to a provider or two. All right, cool. Let's see, let's scroll on back up. So when you put in these numbers, then it's going to actually bring those numbers over to your budget summary tab. So you want to start on your detail tabs first and then work on your budget summary. Yes?
I just have a question, since we're talking about race to the top. Well, this is school readiness.
This is school
So
readiness.
if you have to race to the top and we're rolling, apparently we're rolling,
Are we
if we had discretionary dollars in 16, are those still available or did it go bye-bye?
That is a really good question, and I'm not sure I know the whole answer, but I think
Depends on if it was part of your ask for the budget amendment.
Okay.
Interesting.
so. Emily said it depends on if it was part of your ask, and I think the other piece is for 16, 17, this number is going to be 0. So the only thing that you might have is going to be related to funds that were forfeited. And so funds that are forfeited from a provider go into your pool, and then you can redistribute those to participants. So it's possible you would still have discretionary because you have forfeitures, and that happens a lot with coaching hours, but you won't have it specifically budgeted up here. I think in the case where if you had some amount of discretionary, maybe try and get it over to your operating budget or something like that, so that you can spend it for what. Because Race to the Top, the discretionary guidance had a lot of different pieces to it. Like you could use it for council-related stuff. So it's kind of a different term than how we're using it here. I don't know if that, does that make sense to you? Okay, so it's kind of a fresh start, the Race to the Top. And what we're going to do is just really try to make sure that all the funding streams have what was obligated, so that no council is kind of in trouble unless there were like level 2 sites who are getting funds or other things that were not allowable that were going on. Okay, let's see. So if we, this is also a really important date, the council spending end date. So you all know about, on the requisition, there is a spending expiration date, right? Does that sound familiar? That expiration date is only for the provider. So what that date does, the only thing it does, is it just takes the requisition off EC Connect. So the provider doesn't have access to it to spend. As a council, if you want to have access to that requisition in EC Connect after that expiration date, then you can put in a date here. So if this is blank, it's just going to use the expiration date on the requisition. If you want, like let's say the requisition expiration date is April 15th, if you really want your council staff to have until May 15th to finish up spending, then you can just put in May 15th here. So that's what that does. Cool. And again, that's configurable for each council so that you can set it up the way that makes sense to you. So I think we've kind of hit that one.
Hey Sharon, is that also, like if people wanted to say a provider had a 60-day window to spend it, and then once they, assuming it's very well communicated to the provider,
Yeah.
I don't know, is that same thing?
That is not that same thing.
Okay,
But
sorry.
that is a good question. So the question is, can you create kind of a rolling spending deadline based on when a requisition is issued? And at this time, that is not something we are doing. It is probably something we could do. But what is happening is we have a default expiration date that's somewhere else on the screen. And that is going to punch into the requisition. So usually, I think it's April 15th in most cases. And so if we wanted to make that rolling, that would just be some additional code we need to do. We could probably do it if that's what you want to do.
Oh no, I was just wondering, like, because I know with some of the councils in my area, we had talked about, trying to get providers to spend their QI, but if they're not responding, at what point is it forfeited? And so I was just asking if that is, but that doesn't seem to be the way to make that a forfeiture.
Yeah, so if you were doing it specific to a specific provider, you can change the expiration date on the requisition, and then that would be honored. So like if you're saying, hey provider, you originally had until May or April 15th, but I'm not seeing any progress here, and I really need you to spend at least 50% by X date, then you could actually set that as the expiration date and be able to judge that. So, and we also do kind of less technical deadlines like that. So like we'll have performance goals that we communicate to the providers around 50%